And as you bring your attention inside of yourself, notice where it goes. With this growing and heightened awareness of yourself, where does your attention now go? And let's do a brief body scan, starting with the back of your head. How's the back of your head lying on the ground? Or if you have a ponytail, you might want to take it out if you feel like it might get in the way. And draw that imaginary line from the back of your head, back of your neck, all the way down your spine. And notice how your midline is now making contact with the ground. If you had ink on the back side of yourself, what would your mat look like if you stood up right now and walked around? What part of yourself is heaviest into the ground? And what part of yourself is lifted from the ground? And right away, when you lay down and bring your awareness inside of yourself, notice where you're holding onto. We talked earlier about some contraction points within inside of ourselves. And notice if one side of your pelvis is more in contact with the ground versus the other. Notice which way your head is pointed. And notice what's the line from your nose to your tailbone. Is it straight or is it angled in some way, shape, or form? And what part of the back of your head makes the most contact on the ground? Now I want you to ever so slightly, just barely itty bitty, take your nose downward as if you were doing the downward part of a nod, and then bring it back to the start. Now do that a couple more times. And as you're doing that, bring your awareness to what parts of you are moving, what parts of you are involved with this movement. How many of your vertebrae? Now go nice and slow. Would you say your first 4 or 5 thoracic vertebrae? Like if you could just draw an imaginary line from your neck all the way down the back of your spine, how far would the movement go down towards? Go very slow. And then take your nose just ever so slightly upwards, like as if you were doing the upward part of the nod. And same thing. Notice how the vertebra behind your neck comes slightly upwards towards the ceiling. And then as you release, they flatten a little bit more. Notice that movement of your vertebra up and down. When you take your head back to the neutral place, do you feel a gentle pulling in the back of your head where the vertebra is? And go ahead and take your nose a little bit up and a little bit down. And notice what happens in the vertebra in your upper back and in your neck area with this movement. Okay, now pause. Now bend your knees, stand your feet about hips width apart, that comfortable distance, which hopefully you'll get into the habit of going into all the time when I ask you to bend your knees. And when you stand up, you'll bring your legs instantly to this width apart. Because when your legs are this wide apart, it's easier to breathe. Or if you want to play around with the position of your feet and try maybe 1 inch closer towards each other and see what happens with your breathing, what happens with your comfort in your legs. And you could try bringing them a little wider apart just to play around with what is your most comfortable position for your legs. Great. And now do that same nodding motion with your head and neck. So very gently take your nose ever so slightly upwards. So ever so slightly. So ever so slightly take your nose upwards like you're saying yes, and then taking your nose down. And as you're doing this, what's different with your knees bent? Are more vertebrae involved, or is it the same? Okay, now pause for a second with your nose in the middle. And now very gently, just a few degrees, take your nose a little bit to the right. And first of all, notice the ease of movement to the right. And also notice how many vertebrae come along as you do that turning motion. And come back to the middle. And also we want to be aware of your habits. How much effort do you put into this movement of rolling your head to the right? What are your habits? Because we turn our head so many times a day, and we want to know, are we overworking our muscles when we're doing this? And go ahead and roll your head just a little bit to the left and see, are more vertebrae involved or less or about the same? And do you feel yourself pushing a little bit as you get to the end range? So you want to go a little bit less, because you're going to hit this point where it's just like a little bit more effort to get all the way. And this is a mentality we're trained through life to more is better, push through it. So with the Feldenkrais here, we're basically reversing that mindset. Go once more to the right and once more to the left. And put your finger on your body and your front of your body to the vertebra you can feel it moving down to, or the rib. Go ahead and touch that point in your body with your index finger where you feel the movement traveling down to. Great, there's no right or wrong here. Okay, now rest your head in the middle. And now we're going to focus on your pelvis. So ever so slightly, I'd like you to push through your feet just enough to roll up your tailbone, to roll up your two sit bones. And as you're doing this, notice if you halt your breath, because if you are, you're doing it incorrectly. So it's a very gentle roll up your tailbone just enough so your back flattens. So that was a lot of effort and force. So you want to see if you can do it a little bit less. And you might also notice if you put that extra force and your jaw tightens. So play around with this motion. It's called a very gentle pelvic tilt or pelvic roll. It's not a lift. For a lot of us, we might tend to halt or pull in our belly or our abdominal muscles. And probably if you're doing that right now, that's a habit in other areas of your life. So I encourage you to unravel that pattern and to see if you could use other parts of yourself other than your belly. So the way you're breathing right now, nice and rhythmic and smooth, you want that to continue as you do the pelvic roll. You want to do the pelvic roll as if you could do it for an hour without getting tired. And as you're rolling up your tailbone, notice how far up does the connection go? How far up your ribs, how far up your spine? Just like as we looked at the head and neck, how far down the movement went, now I want you to see how far up the movement goes. And imagine that your pelvis is laying on a clock face, and we'll call the up movement 12 o'clock as if it was pushing into the 12 o'clock on the clock, and as it releases, down below is the 6 o'clock. So I'd like you to roll from the 12 o'clock on the clock to the 6 o'clock. Now as you go down to the 6 o'clock, just with the intention of going down to touch the number 6, you might feel a little pulling of the spine. So see if you can encourage that. It's as you roll up to the 12 o'clock, it's a gentle pushing of the spine upwards. And as you roll down, it gently pulls it down. So we're looking right now at the connection between the pelvis and the head. And go ahead and do that a couple more times. And then take a rest. Now when you're resting, you can either rest with your knees bent or let them go long. It's up to you. And the rest allows the nervous system to integrate the change. Notice right now which way your nose is pointing. And if you feel like it's pointed more in one direction than the other, see if you can gently bring your nose back to the center. So we're really learning what the center is. Everybody's got a different center. And a lot of times when people lay down, they have no idea what their center is. But this lesson is going to really help you to clarify your center. And when you are more centered and balanced, you're more powerful in the world, both on the physical level, like physical strength, but also on the emotional level. Okay, go ahead and bend your knees, stand your feet. And now I want you to imagine the clock under your pelvis and just notice where the 9 o'clock and the 3 o'clock would be. So in your mind, create the 3 o'clock and the 9 o'clock. So keeping your legs and your knees more or less where they are, I'd like you to roll your pelvis so you roll the clock onto the 3 o'clock and then back to the center. See if you can organize your body to figure out how to do this really effortlessly and easily. So you're going to roll onto the 3 o'clock and then back to the center, and then let's roll to the 9 o'clock. So see if you can do less effort in your legs, less effort in your body. The breathing that you're doing right now, see if you can keep it regulated and rhythmic. So 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock. 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock. Now at first, keep doing this a few more times. At first, just a little bit of yourself will be involved with it because our bodies need the intelligence to incorporate more of the ribs, more of the low back, and to differentiate the movement from that of your legs. Because your body's so intelligent and it learns fast, you'll quickly learn how to use more parts of yourself for the movement. So right now we're doing the 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock. So as you're rolling to the 3 o'clock, which foot do you push more through? The opposite. And as you're rolling to the 9 o'clock, see if it helps to push the opposite foot a little bit more to the ground. Go back and forth and see if you can make it nice and smooth and easy, almost like you're giving yourself a back massage. Feeling the even weight distributed across your back of your pelvis, your low back area. Okay, just pause, take a rest. And now I want you to think about that 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock movement we just did with the pelvis. And we're going to go back to that, but this time we're going to coordinate it with the movement of the nose. So that means as you roll your pelvis to 12 o'clock, very gently, ever so slightly, take your nose just slightly upwards. And as you release it down to the 6 o'clock, ever so gently, take your nose downwards. So take your body for a ride, up and down. Make it nice and lazy, nice and easy. Make it so it's almost like a massage on your back. Giving yourself the much needed rest that you deserve. And notice what's going on inside your mouth and your jaw. And allow your lips to part, especially as you roll up to the 12 o'clock. Let's go ahead and do that. Every time you roll your pelvis up to the 12 o'clock, allow your mouth to part slightly as you bring your chin and nose slightly upwards. And then release. As you roll up to the 12 o'clock, your chin gently lifts, your mouth opens, and then release. Do that a few more times. So opening the jaw as you roll up. And when you get it all coordinated, it should feel really yummy, really good. pause, either with your knees bent or long, it's up to you. Okay, go ahead and bend your knees. And this time, we're going to do the same movement with your pelvis, but this time, when you take your pelvis down to 6 o'clock, I want you to open your jaw. So let's go ahead and first just roll your pelvis up to 12 o'clock. And then as you bring it down to the 6 o'clock, allow it to pull your spine downward and allow your jaw to open. And allow your jaw to open. So go to 12 o'clock. And as you roll to the 6 o'clock, there's a gentle pull on your spine. And imagine that it's connected to your jaw, your lower jaw. And your lower jaw just falls open. And feel how easy it is to move your head and neck. You don't even have to think about initiating a movement from your head and neck. It just happens. It's like your head and neck is being carried, which is the key to avoiding neck pain. We want the head and neck just to come along for the ride. Okay, take a pause. Now we're going to differentiate the movement of the head from the pelvis. So listen very carefully. What I'm going to have you do, I want you to think about this before you actually do it. I want you to roll up your tailbone towards the 12 o'clock, but this time instead of taking your head and chin upwards, you're going to take it downwards. So think about that once or twice. You're going to roll your pelvis to 12 o'clock and your chin goes down. And then as you roll your pelvis to 6 o'clock, your chin goes up. So after you've thought it through 3 times or so, go ahead and do it. So make sure it's equal and opposite timing. Nice, smooth, and coordinated. And anytime you get tripped up when you're trying to differentiate certain movements, just pause, take a break, take a rest, and start all over. Wonderful. Okay, take a pause. So I want you to imagine where the 3 o'clock and the 9 o'clock is. The 3 o'clock is on the left, and the 9 o'clock is on the right, underneath your pelvis. And I want you to think about rolling your pelvis to the 3 o'clock, and as you do that, your nose is going to ever so gently roll to the left. Yeah, go ahead and do it when you're ready. And then you're going to come back to the middle. You're going to roll your pelvis to the 9 o'clock, and ever so gently, your nose is going to roll to the right. Go back and forth like that. Now see if you could add a constraint, and the constraint being your knees stay more or less in the center. Okay, pause. Pause in the middle, come back to the center. And as you're taking the pauses, just keep noticing what's changing inside. You might, for instance, feel more of your low back in contact with the ground. More looseness in your jaw, more space in your mouth. And now we're going to take the pelvis and the nose opposite. So what that means is you're going to roll your pelvis to the 3 o'clock and your head is going to turn ever so slightly to the right. Come back to the center, take your pelvis to the 9 o'clock and your nose moves ever so slightly to the left. Go back and forth like that. Remembering to keep your jaw soft. You're doing great. Do it a few more times. And then when you feel like you've had enough, pause in the middle. Now I want you to imagine that the clock underneath your pelvis is a circular clock, of course. It's about the shape of your pelvis. It's about the size of it. The circumference of the clock is the circumference of your pelvis. So I want you to imagine what I'm about to say before you actually do it. I want you to imagine that you're going to trace the circumference of the clock with your pelvis, but your knees are going to stay more or less stationary. And so when you do this, try to avoid adding any force from your jaw or your upper body. I want you to think about tracing it 3 times clockwise. And then I want you to think about tracing it 3 times counterclockwise. And then when you're ready, nice and slow, go ahead and do it. The slower the better, because this is a new skill. And it's requiring different parts of your back that maybe you haven't organized in this way before. But if you are somebody that has a habit of tensing your low back, or if you have low back tightness, or if you have low back pain, this is a good one for you. And as you're tracing the circumference, just notice what your head and neck naturally wants to do. If you let go of the constraints and the holding in your head or neck, what does it want to do? Okay, pause, and then go the other way around the clock, counterclockwise. And as you continue to do this, add the movement with your nose. Let your nose follow the circle in the same direction at the same time. Almost like there was a rope connecting your pelvis and your nose. So the direction the pelvis goes, the nose goes. And as you're drawing the circle with your pelvis, imagine that you're drawing a circle with your nose on the ceiling. Imagine that there was a pencil shooting out from the tip of your nose, and it's tracing a circle on the ceiling. So now I want you to bring your focus to the circle you're tracing with the pencil on your nose. So less attention on the pelvis and more attention on your nose. And as you're tracing the circle with your nose on the ceiling, just notice what your pelvis wants to do. Just let your pelvis follow. Let your nose lead and your pelvis follow. Okay, just pause for a second, take a breath. And then trace with your nose the other way. Make that circle with the pencil on the ceiling from your nose. And as you're making the circle with your nose the other way, notice what your pelvis wants to do. Does it want to follow? Make it nice and lazy. Make it feel really good, and then take a break. So just go ahead and take a break and let your legs go long. And go ahead and bend your knees. Bring them to that comfortable place. And let's go back to the initial movement that you are doing with your nose, where you take your nose ever so slightly in the upwards direction. And then back to the start. And as you're taking your nose in the upward direction, notice what's going on now in your spine. How much of your spine is now involved. And then take your nose a little bit downwards. And as you take your nose downward, do you feel more of your vertebra being traction, being pulled? And then just take your nose up and down and see how far down your spine you could feel the connection. See if you could feel it all the way to your pelvis. So nice and gentle. Now pause. You don't want to do too much neck stuff because that could result in discomfort. And now let's have the pelvis take over. So I'd like you to do the 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock with the pelvis like we did initially. And as you're doing this, see how the head and neck wants to naturally move. If you let go of the holding in your chest and in the head and neck, what's the natural rhythm that happens? Yeah, it's like taking your head for a ride. And does your mouth want to open at either the rolling up or the rolling down? What's most natural in your mouth to do? The new normal, we'll call it. Okay, Now just pause, relax everything. And very gently take your nose just a few degrees to the right. See how much of your vertebra in your body comes along with this movement now? And then take it just a little bit to the left, just to notice and compare. Compare the now from where you were initially. Okay, and come back to the center for the grand finale movement. And the last movement, if you want to do this, this is optional, is you could go ahead and do the pelvic circle, tracing the circumference of the imaginary clock. So if you want to go ahead and do that, go ahead and do that. And just see now what parts of yourself are involved in the circle, in the movement. So a small circle of the pelvis. And start to make it a little faster. Speed it up. Speed it up. And notice how much of your body is now connected. And go ahead and move your head and neck however it wants to. Give it its full freedom to move however it wants. And then go the other way, roll your pelvis the other way. And go faster and faster. Make it playful. Make it playful. It doesn't have to be perfect. Make it playful and feel good. And then go ahead and take a complete rest. Let your legs go long. And we're going to check in now inside how our body's doing. Bring your attention now to the direction your nose is pointed. You might find it's more in the middle. And notice what that line of your spine is from the back of your head all the way down. How about the weight of the pressure of the back of your pelvis? How's that? How's your breathing? And anything else that stands out for you. Just take a moment to be with yourself and notice. And when you're ready, go ahead and bend your knees. And you might want to windshield wiper your knees a little to the left and then to the right. And feel that connection through your spine, through your back as you do that. You can pause here. And at your own time, you're going to roll to the right, roll to your side. And remember the way I taught you to get up. Head comes up last. Using your pelvis. And at your own time, you could come up to standing. And just pause in standing for a moment. And as you come up to standing, notice what's different. How is your weight distributed through your feet? And you could stand on one foot, and if you want, you could lift up your other foot just to feel what the balance is like on one foot. And then shift to the other side. And feel how stable you are. Okay. And then pause back. And take your head upwards, looking up at the ceiling, And feel if you could feel that connection through your spine, all the way down to your pelvis and your feet. And then go the opposite way, looking down. And then come back to the center and look to the right. Feel that connection through your spine. Back to the center, and then to the left. Great. So in a moment, I'm going to have you walk around. And as you do that, really feel the pelvic head connection. So go ahead and go for a little walk right now. And enjoy this connection in your body.